good evening! And before anybody says it, yes, I did things with my hair. Before we dive into writing relating stuff, I'm just gonna get this out of the way. This is apparently the product of what happens when you've been dyeing your hair red for 4.5 months, touching up your ends with color depositing shampoo, and you try to use Color Oops, which is made for permanent hair dye. So this is like pretty darn close to my natural hair color on top, but this is not coming out apparently. And before you go, oh, I actually am like thrilled with this. I had actually looked at pictures on Pinterest of hair very, very similar to this in the past and always wanted to try it. So I somehow magically got to try this without having to pay like $150 at a salon to have it done. Just because I color oopsed my hair and this is what happened to happen. So anyway, that is a minute wasted talking about non-writing related crap. We're gonna move on. So I desperately need to get some writing done tonight. I have a beta reader who is through as many chapters as I have written. So I need to get at least a chapter written tonight, and I'm trying to do a chapter a day for the next 4 days, at least until I'm done with this first draft, because I've slacked for like 2 months and not gotten them done. I had like 5 chapters, which turned into like 8 chapters that needed to get done, and now I really need to buckle down and get them done. So I am doing a chapter a day until I am done with this book. So I haven't started at all today. I got the new outline written for this chapter because I realized a chapter needed to be inserted. But other than that, I haven't gotten started at all. So today, what we're going to actually do is a fun little game. We're gonna kind of bundle me doing word sprints together with me giving some information on useful writing tools and resources that I found between each writing sprint. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the first tool that I wanna recommend, and obviously that's YouTube. The reasons are obvious. It's just that you have access to not just writing advice, but you have access to information on things that you have to fact check for your writing. You have access to inspiration. You have access to music, which will help you. You've got access to pretty much everything on YouTube. Anything you might need to know about to be able to write, any motivation that you might need to write, as in stuff that maybe is motivational but not necessarily towards writing, but it still helps you with your writing. So that's the first tool I'm going to recommend, and that's kind of like a given. So we're going to get into the ones that maybe aren't as obvious later. But first, I'm going to excuse myself, and I'm going to do a 20-minute writing sprint. And when I get back, I'll let you know how I did. All right, so I did a 20-minute word sprint, and I managed to get 504 words done. I don't know what it is, but whenever it's not NaNoWriMo, I can only get like 500 words done in 20 minutes instead of like 600 or 700. But incidentally, that 504 words, happened to put me at my scene break for this chapter, so I'm about halfway through the chapter, so I'm super excited. Maybe in the next 20-minute word sprint I might be able to finish the chapter, but I'm switching perspectives, so that might screw me up a little bit. We'll see. Anyway, it is time for another good resource that I found for helping with writing related things. One thing I really want to recommend that I use a ton, especially right after I get through my first draft, because it really helps me do my first read through a little bit more efficiently and to catch a lot of the typos that I would otherwise miss if I was skim reading and I was actually just reading it on a page, is a app called VoiceStream. Now it is a app where you can, if you've got like a Word doc or whatever version of your book that you've been writing, you can put it into the app and it will read it out loud to you. Now the voice is still a little bit robotic, like all of those reading aloud, not dictation, but oration, I guess, softwares, but it's definitely one of the best ones I found as far as those kind of apps are concerned. Now, it is not free. I think I paid I don't remember how much I paid. I want to say it was like $14.99 for the app, but I'm not sure. But it has been a tremendous help, and it is very easy to get through my first read through while using that, so that I can just read through for big story issues, listen to it, and catch some of the really, really bad typos, and just, you know, those sentences where you write it and then you go back and read it and you're like, what the hell was I trying to say? Anyway, it's very, very helpful for those kind of situations. And that's something I would highly recommend, or maybe looking into another app that's similar to it. I just prefer that one. I have heard, however, that if you have a Samsung instead of an Apple, that Voice Dream is not as good on Samsung. I don't know why, but it works pretty darn good on Apple. Okay, so that was the second resource. I'm actually gonna take like a 5-minute break before I do another 20-minute word sprint, but then I'm gonna do another 20-minute word sprint, and then I will get back to you with another resource that I find helpful for writing. All right, so I did not do another 20-minute word sprint. I actually only did 10 minutes, and that's because I reached the end of the chapter. That was a lot shorter than I thought it was gonna be. This chapter only ended up being like 900 words. I'm gonna have to add more to it later because there were some parts that were a little bit rushed and I just need to fidget with the wording a little bit and stuff. So it'll probably end up being more along 1,000 words, which is more what I consider kind of a minimum for me. But I did it! I finished the chapter, and I'm so happy because I was really doubting that I was gonna get that done tonight with everything else that I had to do today. I had a full work day and I ran like 20 errands after work. So I'm thrilled. However, I feel like I'm not getting to go over many writing resources because of this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a read through of the chapter to catch some of my typos and fix a little bit of the wording and all that jazz. And I'm going to do 5-minute bouts of that, and between each one continue to give you a resource. So the next resource that I wanted to recommend as something that I found really, really helpful with my writing is a couple of books. Now I'm going to lump a couple of these together because these are just 3 specific books that I found really, really helpful in either getting my writing done, staying motivated, or contributing to my overall quality of writing. The first book that I thought was super helpful, and it actually is what made me realize what was wrong with my first book that I wrote, was Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. This is a very well-known book in the writing community. Save the Cat, the screenwriting book, is also very well-known, and afterwards this one came out, and it was so helpful. It made me realize what I was missing and why my story kind of felt like it just went at the end. So it was extremely helpful. If you find that you're struggling with plot elements of your own writing, that is a fantastic book to maybe look into getting. There's also an Audible version. That's actually the version I went with because I don't ever have any time ever to read through whole books, and I'm lucky if I actually read maybe like 5 books a year max that I actually read instead of just listening to an Audible. But on Audible, I'll get through like 70 a year. Anyway, that is one that I definitely recommend. The next one, and this one is actually probably the most helpful book for me as far as just getting anything done, but I've really, really used it in getting writing done, and I think I can attribute a lot of my success in getting almost very close to 2 full first drafts done within the last like year and 3 months, is The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. There has been a lot of buzz about this book, and there are other YouTubers who give much more effective breakdowns of that book than I'm going to give, but I just would encourage you to give it a shot. It is incredibly helpful if you struggle just to get started on writing. If you find yourself in a situation where you keep telling yourself, oh, I should get this writing done, but I don't feel like it. maybe try out that book. It's also available on Audible. That's where I have it. And it's really another added thing that's really interesting to listen to it. Mel Robbins actually reads it, and it doesn't sound like she's reading a book. It sounds like she's giving a speech, like not a boring speech, but more like a TED Talk type thing or something. So it's a really good listen if you get it on Audible, but otherwise it's still a really good book, and it has some good resources in the book for like exercises and stuff that might help you to get more motivated to get crap done. Although I don't think she would want me to phrase it as getting motivated. It's just to get crap done, period. Not to get motivated to get crap done, just to get crap done. Third book that I found extremely helpful, and it was a very interesting book, and I found it helpful not just in getting writing habits installed in my life, but also getting in good habits that have affected my job profoundly, is The Power of Habits, Why We Do What We Do by Charles Duhigg, also available on Audible. It's just a really interesting read, and it explains a lot of the psychology behind how we form habits and why we make the habits that we do, and so on and so forth. But it is really interesting, and if you are looking to get yourself some better habits as far as writing is concerned, or just anything is concerned, maybe give that book a listen or a read. There are my 3 book recommendations for now. I have other ones, but those are the 3 most influential ones that I've had so far as affecting my writing. Aside from that, I'm gonna go work for 5 minutes on editing this chapter that I just wrote and trying to get it to where it's not so rough. And then I will be right back with you with another helpful writing resource. So I actually have a lot more resources, and I realize I'm not going to get to them in this video. I got about halfway through rereading through my chapter though. I'm going to leave the rest for tomorrow so that it refreshes me just in time to write the following chapter. But anyway, I did want to go through one more resource that I believe is really, really valuable, and something that you might find helpful with your writing. I know I already mentioned YouTube, but I want to specifically talk about 2 channels in particular. The first being Crash Course, and if you're not familiar with them, they have different series in a multitude of subjects. The subjects that I would strongly recommend that I've found very helpful for me with my writing, and this is going to sound weird because these have nothing to do with writing, or at least most of them don't, is the Crash Course Psychology, Crash Course Philosophy, Crash Course Literature, so that one actually has something to do with writing, and Crash Course World History. Now, the reason I bring those up is going to be the same reason I bring up the other channel. Even though 3 of those really have nothing to do with writing, the more you know, the more you know. And the more you know about a broad spectrum of subjects, the better you're going to be able to write about a broad spectrum of subjects. Now, especially psychology and philosophy, as I mentioned, those ones are really, really helpful in really knowing how to create realistic characters, because you are learning about how real people's minds work and how logic works and how people's brains will interpret certain things, which can really help to create very realistic 3-dimensional characters. And then world history is very helpful, one, for inspiration, because it gives you a lot of ideas, because there are a lot of historical models that you can mirror in your plots. I'm not going to go into what historical models are. I'm going to leave you to look at the other channel I'm going to recommend to learn what those are, and that is the Overly Sarcastic podcast. Look them up. They are awesome. There are 2 hosts. There's Red and there's Blue. And Red is a female host, and she does stuff that's more to do with actual writing. She has a particular video series that I strongly recommend that you check out. It's called Trope Talks, and it goes into a bunch of the different tropes that are very common in either television, writing, whatever, any storytelling, and how those are typically used, how you might be able to use them, so on and so forth. They're very interesting, and it's presented in a very funny, very interesting manner that makes it not boring. She also has series on classical literature like Shakespeare and other classics, which is done in a way that actually makes Shakespeare not freaking boring as all hell. It's actually hilarious. She is very funny. The other host on there, Blue, he does stuff that is history. And some mytho-history, because he does talk about like the Odyssey and the Iliad, and stuff like that. But those are incredibly interesting and very influential. If you're writing anything that is inspired by Greek or Roman history in particular, he does a lot on that. I personally draw from that in my own writing, and it is a huge help. Anyway, this video is getting super long, and at the risk of it being more than 15 minutes, I'm gonna cut it short here. I do have more resources I want to share and stuff like that, but I will save that for another video. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this rambly, crazy video. You guys have a great evening, and I will talk to you later.